We have a lot to talk about today. As you guys will know, Kyle's warming up here. We're going to save his rant for later on, but welcome back to another edition of the Let's Debate podcast powered by Delahanty Media. I'm Nick Delahanty, like I mentioned a few seconds ago. That is Kyle Delahanty. We're coming to you from Garfield, New Jersey. It's another recorded segment of the show. Why is that? Because we want you guys to enjoy football tonight. Obviously, we're going to be doing the same thing. So, 7 o'clock start tonight. We thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedules to check us out. Again, NBA playoffs is roaring. We got a couple of upsets, and one that ruins my ultimate finals pick. Oh, actually, both, to be quite honest with you. Kyle still got his one of the two going. And then you got the Major League Baseball season that's kind of coming to an end very soon. And then where Kyle's rant will go on is the NFL. Now, Kyle, I hope you've calmed down a little bit since Sunday. I know that there's a little bit of frustration from your end, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say tonight. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, I think I calmed down a little bit, but I do have a lot to say. I'm excited to mention it later. It's actually the topic I want to jump to, so I'm glad we're kind of doing that as a grand finale. But we do have a lot to talk about today. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Welcome back to the Let's Debate podcast. You guys know the deal. Head over to our website, delahantymedia.com. We give you guys a ton of different options, video, audio. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You name it, we got it. We try to make it as convenient as possible. Head over to our social media. You can find us on Instagram at Delahanty Media, Facebook, Let's Debate Podcast, and then Twitter at Let's Debate Pod. But yeah, like Nick said, we got a lot to cover, so I wanted to get that out of the way, and we'll get the show rolling.
And let's get it rolling. In fact, we're in the NBA playoffs. We are in the finals, the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, and two teams that a lot of people expected to be there are home out of the bubble. That's the Milwaukee Bucks and the Los Angeles Clippers. Let's start with the Milwaukee Bucks. They lose to the Miami Heat. In that series, the Heat just had their way with them. Giannis goes down with an injury late in the series, but it really didn't matter. At that point, the Heat were up. And then you look at the other side of the East, you have the Celtics taking on the Raptors. The Celtics actually took the series there, so we have a matchup right now featuring the Heat and the Celtics. What's your overall thought on how the Eastern Conference has shaped up?
It's not what I expected at all. COVID or not, Miami, I feel like kind of took the league by storm. I don't think anyone really expected them to be doing what they're doing. I know going into this season, once I heard Jimmy Butler signed there, the way I looked at it was, wow, Jimmy Butler got his money and he's going to beautiful South Beach. They'll be a playoff team, but they're not going to compete for a title. But hats off to them. They're playing great. And they were playing great before the suspended season as well. And that momentum pretty much carried into the bubble. They swept the Bucks. I mean, people can make the excuses that Giannis was injured or not. Listen, they outplayed him when he was on the court too. So there's really no excuses there that could be used. Boston, that was a great series, Boston versus Toronto. And that was pretty much, I feel, if you predicted that matchup was going to play out, you had to predict that was going to go 6 or 7. So it didn't shock me at all that went the length that it did. And on the Western Conference, well, we'll jump into the Western Conference in a minute. But overall, listen, I'm rooting for the Heat. I kind of want to see them go because everything they've been doing so far has been unpredictable. And I love that about sports. So they're playing great basketball. There's a lot of youth on the team. What's your take on it?
I love what the Heat are doing as well. First of all, if you would have told me that both of the top seeds, including the defending champions in the Raptors, even though we know they lost Kawhi, would be out going into the Eastern Conference Finals, I would have probably laughed at you. And I would have probably expected that the more likely upset was Boston over Toronto. That was just my take on it. I thought that was a possibility going throughout the playoffs. But you got to give credit to Miami. Like you said, the young core, you add a guy like Jimmy Butler, and you know what? Sometimes it just takes that veteran to come in and be that guy. And he embraced the role in Miami. He's loving it. And let's give some credit to Eric Spoelstra. The guy is just a good coach. He doesn't get enough credit because obviously won a couple of titles with some really good Heat teams that had LeBron and whatnot. But you got to recognize this dude as one of the best coaches in the league. That series in the East, I am really intrigued by because I love Boston. I said it on a couple of shows ago. Jason Tatum's the only Duke player that I love. I love watching him play. Kemba Walker's another guy that I just love watching. Brad Stevens, in my opinion, is the top 5 coach in the league. And you have a Heat team that's hungry. Those young guys, they want to play. They want to be there. They want to prove something. So, the underdogs are out, and the East is wide open. I think this series has the possibility of going 6 or 7 as well.
Yeah, you kind of took some of the words out of my mouth. I was going to mention Spoelstra. You got to give him credit. I mean, he's doing a great job, and he is one of the better coaches. And he's a vet now. I remember when he kind of just got going. It's crazy to think that he's been in the league this long now. And some of the teams that he's coached, you mentioned the LeBron, the Big Three, and all that. But listen, if you jump back to the Boston-Toronto series, you mentioned that as an upset. I actually didn't look at it as an upset because, oddly enough, I looked at Boston as the better team. And I do think that this series now between Miami and Boston, there's no doubt in my mind it's got to go 6 or 7. It's got to. Miami, I want to almost call them the comeback kids. They just never kind of give up. They came back from a pretty big lead the other night. Jimmy Butler, they've been clutch late in games. Bam had a huge block, that everyone was talking about. I was watching it live. And we've spoke about this in the previous episodes. There's something about them. They're just hungry. That youth, and Jimmy Butler's that type of player, and he's been trying to get this out of his previous teams, like the Sixers and the T-Wolves that he was on the past few years. And those young guys just didn't have that fire. Wiggins, Towns, Simmons, Embiid, they just didn't have it. But these guys that he has on the Heat right now, they're hungry. That's why they've gotten this far. I think it's going to be a good series. I think the series gets even better once Kemba Walker starts clicking. Because Kemba Walker's been playing bad right now. And I think Tatum's their best player on Boston. There's no doubt he's their best player. He's the future of that team. But they need Kemba to step up. In order for them to get to 6 or 7, I think Kemba needs to step up.
There's a lot of good points there. And you mentioned Kemba struggling. Game 1 can't happen again for Kemba. And let's remember, Celtics are without Gordon Hayward. How long are they going to be without him? That's the deciding factor in this series, I think. Because you add a guy like that gives you the possibility of going 6 or 7. Yeah, he might not be fresh and might not be able to give you 40 minutes, but when he's on the court, you're going to get a lot of impact out of him. My thing for Boston is this. I think they blew Game 1. Blew Game 1 in the fact of late in a ball game, and you saw it in the Toronto series. You can go back and watch the film. They go ISO a lot at the end of ball games. They go ISO with Tatum. They go ISO with Kemba, and it's predictable. There's no ball movement. There's no type of sense of urgency to get a good shot up. It's just give the ball to your best player and hope they make the shot. And let's remember, they're human. They're not going to make shots every time. So I want to see a little bit more strategy coming out of timeouts and down the stretch for this team, because if they keep playing that way down the stretch in close games, a team like the Heat are going to take advantage of that. They're going to hit the shots. The offensive movement in that Game 1 was a lot better on Miami's side than it was on Boston's side down the stretch. And that's another key factor you got to look into with the rest of this series.
Yeah, it's odd because we both mentioned Brad Stevens and how good of a coach he's been. It's surprising that he hasn't made adjustments. And no one's really talking about this, but it just caught my attention. I feel like there's got to be a little bit of pressure on Brad Stevens. I'm not talking pressure as in he's on the hot seat, but this is a guy who he's gotten deep into the playoffs, since he's been there, but he's just not getting over that hump. And I know Miami's playing great, and they might be the better team right now. They're the hot team right now. But seeding-wise, you're a better team than the Miami Heat. So if you're going to get over the hump, this is your time. Giannis and the Bucks are knocked out. The Sixers had their injuries. You got past Toronto. Good for you, having accomplished that. But now you're versing a fifth seed Miami Heat team, or a 4 seed. I forget which one it is. One of those two. You're the better team. You need to get over that hump. You need to get into the finals. It's just weird he hasn't made those adjustments yet. But I feel like there's a little bit of pressure on Stevens to get over that hump.
I agree with you, too, and especially given there's so much talk about his legacy, too, because if he goes to the finals, he'd be one of how many coaches to go to a national championship and also an NBA finals. So there's a lot on the line for him in terms of legacy, but let's remember, he's still young, too. But like you said, I think Boston's got the better roster. I really do. I don't think there's any debate about it. If you look head-to-head up and down the roster, Miami may be a little more hungry, but in terms of talent, Kemba and Tatum alone at the top of the roster has to entice you and think that they can win this series. So, give me a quick, bold prediction. Who wins the series? We know Miami's up, but do they hold on to win the series?
That's a tough one. I was thinking about this earlier, and I feel like I'm going back and forth. You know, I think if Boston can get Hayward back, that's huge, right? But we don't know the answer to that question. Um, I feel like the momentum's in Miami's favor. I really do, but I'm gonna say Boston. I think Boston slide. I think it get through. If Boston's gonna win, it's gonna be a game seven. I think this one goes seven. I'm gonna say Boston advances.
I agree with you 100%. If this goes 7, it's Boston's series to lose. But anything under that, Miami's going to win the series. I hate to say it because I want to see Boston move on. I like their roster. I want to see what Tatum could do in the finals, especially against that good Western Conference team. But I just think that the momentum, like you said, is on Miami's favor. And right now, if they don't have Hayward and say they drop game 2, it's going to be a huge deficit to come down from. Yeah, it's capable. You can definitely do it, but it's going to take a lot. I'm going Miami in 6. If that makes
Okay.
sense. I'm going to go Miami in 6, but like you said, if a game 7 comes to play, I just think Boston comes out and they'll represent the East in the finals. Now, let's shift over to the West, and we got to talk about a guy that you absolutely love, LeBron James. He pretty much took care of the Houston Rockets. Pretty entertaining series. LeBron, after losing game 1, kind of just took over, and Anthony Davis had a series. And, what was your take on that one?
You know, it's interesting because all throughout LeBron's career, you kept hearing, oh, if he was in the West, he'd have a tougher time, this and that. Listen, he's not in the finals yet, right? Or he might not even get there. But he's taking care of business in the West right now in his first ever, playoff appearances in the Western Conference. So I'm happy about that. And you're starting to see people talking about that now. You know, if you're on social media, people are making jokes about it. But listen, they took care of Houston. It was pretty much a cakewalk for them. I know they dropped the first game, but after that, it was all the Lakers. But now it's going to be interesting because the Clippers were knocked out, right? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But now they're taking on the Nuggets. I don't know what to expect of the Nuggets because, like I spoke about Miami, they're like the comeback kids. They're the real comeback kids. I mean, they were down 3-1 in 2 straight series, and they came back. They have a lot of young talent. The momentum's definitely in their favor right now. But Lakers are playing well. They're being led by LeBron. They're being led by AD. But LeBron's really, the driving force of the team, like as always. What was your take on that series?
Well, like you said, they took care of Houston relatively easily. D'Antoni left. He's not going to coach them anymore. It was kind of obvious. Who knows if they're going to even keep this roster together. Harden and Westbrook, who knows if it even works, to be quite honest with you. I think they need more in order for that pair to work. But the way I think about this is in a different perspective. And I'm thinking about Sir LeBron James. And right now, as he's heading into the Western Conference Finals, and you know what? I give him credit for what he's done. He's taking care of business in the West, and he's proving people wrong. But if you are LeBron or anybody in the Lakers organization, and you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, okay, what is he, 35, 36-year-old LeBron James doesn't have to go through Giannis, doesn't have to go through Kawhi, doesn't have to go through Durant, doesn't have to go through Curry, doesn't have to go through any of those guys to possibly make a finals. You sign up for that 15 out of 10 days. It just worked out nicely. And you know what? Obviously, LeBron can't control what happens in other series. I'm not insinuating that. But if you look at the 3 teams other than the Lakers that are left, the Lakers are better than all 3 teams. They're the best team left in the field, regardless of how you look at it. So you know what? You could say what you want. And the haters are going to say, oh, you know what? It was padded. He didn't have to go through those guys. But that's not up to his control. You know what? You take what you're given. So for LeBron, I think that, number one, I think he's a competitor. I don't think he's hoping that Giannis and Kawhi got knocked out. I'm pretty sure he would have loved to have knocked Kawhi out on his own. But the way it's situated, it couldn't have played out better for LeBron James than the Lakers.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess what you're trying to say is like, with the Lakers being better than the 3 remaining teams, it's their championship to lose.
Yeah, I firmly think
Yeah.
that it's theirs to lose at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no doubt. I think the same. They're the clear favorites. So that it is what it is. LeBron can't control what's going on. If he wins a championship, he wins a championship. If he loses, that's on him, and it might look a little worse because they are the favorites, right? LeBron's definitely a competitor. I'm sure, like you said, he would have loved to verse Kawhi. He would love to verse Giannis because that only adds to his legacy by beating those types of guys in those big situations. But it is what it is, and But although the Clippers are out and everyone talks about, oh, it would have been better if he would have topped Kawhi in the Western Conference Finals. Listen, the Nuggets just beat them 3 games in a row. So maybe the Nuggets are the actual better team. It is what it is. Like, the Nuggets were the better team in the past 3 games. They won 4 out of 7 games. They played better than the Clippers. So maybe on paper, the Clippers seem like the better team. Maybe they have the bigger superstars, but the Nuggets were the better team right now, and that's who LeBron's going against. So I've always been a big believer in that. Upsets happen, this and that, but in a series like that, like, I can see if you're in March Madness and a team has a bad game, like, that's an upset. That team just played better that day. But in a series, you can't really make much excuses. When you have two healthy teams and they win more games than you, they're the better team.
Now let's just jump into the Clippers Nuggets series. And like you mentioned earlier, Clippers were up 3-1. Looked like they were going to move on, but then it just went off wire, and they choked in the series. Now my question to you, you mentioned the Nuggets being comeback kids and whatnot. Who do you give the most blame to on the Clippers side of the ball? Like, who deserves the most blame according to you?
Well, I don't think Kawhi or PG played well at all. I mean, especially in Game 7, like, they dropped the ball. And, I was noticing this about Kawhi. I mean, not Kawhi, PG throughout the entire playoffs. He just didn't seem himself. I just didn't see that same fire from Paul George. And I don't know if there's distractions going on. I don't know what the deal is. Obviously these guys are going through their own issues. They're away from their families. They're isolated from society. So who knows what psychological issues they're having to that extent. But I didn't really see it. And honestly, I'm a big fan of Paul George, but he's kind of annoyed me since they restarted the season. The issues with Damian Lillard and all that. I was kind of happy to see them get knocked out because I think that they really did think they were going all the way and they could kind of trash talk people, and it was, they were just going to get through it. So for me, I put the blame on Kawhi and PG, right? That was the duo that formed. Like, LA signed them both. They were supposed to get over that hump. At least Paul George was supposed to get over that hump. Kawhi won a championship last year. He's the best player in the league. Well, obviously you're not, and you're going home early. What was your take on it?
You mentioned the whole Kawhi didn't look. Not Kawhi. Paul George didn't look like himself, and I agree with you on that. But this is a common occurrence for Paul George in the playoffs. Like, the guy checks out. Oklahoma City checked out. Los Angeles checked out. My biggest blame goes to Doc Rivers because, number one, if you're up 3-1, you got to fire up your team somehow, some way. And like you said, it was kind of to that point where people were getting irritated with them, watching them, how they acted. They were arrogant. They were cocky. The things they were coming out with. It just seemed like they had a problem with everybody, and they had to be arrogant about every situation. So for me, I picked them to go to the finals. I actually picked them to win the finals. I'm happy they're out. It didn't bother me that they were out. Like, if my pick, I would have been happy if they won, obviously, because you predicted it right. But to play as poorly as they did down the stretch, I blame, first of all, Rivers. I don't know if Rivers even has a job there if I'm the GM. I think that the way the window is, I believe Kawhi could leave after next year, or George, whichever one of the two. I think it's only 2 years, and then they could opt out. If I have that short window after that pathetic play, and don't get me wrong, the Nuggets deserve credit, I'm looking to make some changes. And if you're not making it at the top of the roster, you got to look at the coach because obviously, your two best players didn't play well. Why didn't you get them in a position to play better? Or what happened that they didn't play better? Yeah, Montrezl Harrell and George fighting on the sideline. Like, it was pathetic to watch.
Yeah, that's another good point that you make. It's weird because Doc Rivers is just he's considered to be one of the best coaches in the league, right? He's been doing it for so long. He's had a lot of success. But he's been the coach of this Clippers team for how many years now? And they just cannot get over that hump. Like, they cannot get to the Western Conference Finals. In my opinion, they choke in a lot of the series that they're in. I mean, we saw it back when they had Chris Paul and Blake Griffin in those years. They had such a talented roster being led by Doc Rivers, and you would just see them lose in the first round, lose in the second round, get swept here. It's unacceptable. So, I mean, Doc Rivers is someone you have to look at. When you look at series, I don't care if it's baseball, I don't care if it's basketball. You can go back to 2004, ALCS. Yankees dropped 4 straight to Boston, right? You look at the 2016 finals in the NBA. Golden State drops 3 games in a row to Cleveland. You look at what Denver's doing right now. 2 straight series down 3-1. I think you have to look at the team as a whole. Coaching staff, players. losing 4 straight or losing 3 straight, something you guys have to make adjustments. I don't understand how in professional sport you could drop 3 or 4 straight in a series like that. You're seeing the same team over and over. I don't understand how you're not picking up on that. I mean, it happens. It's life, right? Like nothing's perfect, but when you drop a series like that and you choke that bad, I think as a whole, you all have to look at yourselves in the mirror.
And to echo off of that point, if George and Leonard play well and the rest of the team doesn't show up and they lose, you could justify that. You know what? The guys we pay the big bucks for showed up in that series. It was a close one. They didn't even have a chance in Game 7. They were terrible. So it's a little bit of a mixture of both, considering the fact of you're looking at this like, the window's very short with this team. Let's see what they do moving forward with the roster. But now, let's kind of jump into a preview of the Western Conference Finals. Am I out of line to say the following two statements? Number one, if I was picking a center today, I would take Jokic. And number two, am I out of line to think that the Lakers sweep?
I mean, listen, Jokic, I feel like as good as he is, he's very underrated. And this is good for him. Like, he's really showcasing himself now. Listen, if Nuggets can hold on to Jokic and Murray, they're in good shape. Like, they have a really young, talented roster. And I know you mentioned before how, and I don't mean to jump back for a second, but you mentioned how you had the Clippers as your NBA champions, right? And I'm sure everyone would have loved to see LA versus LA, but I'm completely fine with Denver going in because I don't know what to expect. Like, clearly the Lakers are the favorites, and obviously you think so, considering you think it might be a sweep. But we don't know what to expect. Like, Denver's young, they're talented, they move the ball quickly, they know how to score, they're the comeback kids. So I'm excited to see how this series plays out. I don't think it's going to be a sweep. I was actually thinking it goes 5. It's close enough, but I think Lakers take it in 5. I think it's going to be competitive. I think some games are going to be close, but I think the Lakers have too much for them.
And after a while, they were down 3-1 in the first round. They go to 7. You're down 3-1 in the second series against a good Clippers team. As bad as they played, they're still a good team. That's a 7-game series. Now you're going up against a pretty well-rested Lakers team, and it's going to be a little bit of a different scenario. Yeah, obviously anything can happen. You can't predict it, but it wouldn't be a surprise to see the Lakers go to win this in 4 or 5 games. Like, I think 5 is a cap here. Like, I like Murray, I like Jokic, but I don't know how much they have left in the tank. Like, how many nights you're going to play 40 to 45 minutes and in must-win situations? The pressure was on. The pressure is continuously on. And I don't know if LeBron allows the Lakers to kind of slow down a little against this team knowing what they've been up against. I just think that they're in a better spot than the Clippers were in terms of handling them, and I think that the Lakers will do it pretty easily.
Yeah, the Lakers are the better team. They're well-rested, right? What Denver's had to go through in the playoffs thus far, at this point, it has to take a toll on them, right? And they are well-equipped to face Denver because you have Jokic, but the Lakers have AD. That was like the one piece, in my opinion, even since last offseason that the Clippers were missing. They were missing that really good big man. Like, I know Harrell's a nice piece, but he's not in the same conversation as AD and Jokic. So I think it's going to be a good series. I think to an extent it might be competitive. I say 1 or 2 of those games is close. I think Denver probably takes 1 because that's kind of been the trend with the LA throughout the playoffs. Like, it seems like they've dropped 1 like fluke game in each round. And listen, Denver is probably better than Portland and is probably better than Houston. So why not maybe take a game? But yeah, the cap there is 5 games.
Yeah, if they don't win game 1, they're getting swept. I think like that's the LeBron game. He just lets game 1 go. I don't know what it is with them, but they seem to just lose game 1. Houston too. Yep. Houston spacked them in game 1. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? And then game 2, 3, 4, and 5, LeBron just took over and the Rockets had no chance. So you're saying Lakers in the finals. You're going Celtics in the East?
Yep. You're going
I'm going to go Miami here. I just think that nothing against Denver. They had a great year. They might be the team that you sit back and you kind of look at this year and you say, man, they had a great year. That's a really good team. But Lakers and Miami, I would love to see Lakers Celtics. I think tradition, history-wise, in a year that's been so untraditional, having some traditional history to it would be a nice way to end it. And also, got to look at it. November 18th is the NBA draft? They
Hmm.
moved it back. Looks like they're going
Yep.
to start the season a little bit later. So give these guys a little bit of rest because, mind you, by the time the NBA Finals finish, we'll be somewhere in October. So a lot to look into. But the NBA is kicking. They're doing a great job in the bubble. And in a couple of weeks, we'll be crowning an NBA champion. We'll be talking about all the latest regarding the NBA and more. But let's shift over to baseball, where
Yep.
there's a lot going on there, too. I believe there's about 11 or 12 games per team left, and we're getting close to the playoff hunt. Let's talk about the Yankees and the Mets, obviously. Let's start with the Mets. Mets are on the outside looking in, which is pretty pathetic considering that the National League only has, what, 5 teams over 500?
Yeah, it's not looking pretty. But you know what? With what the Mets have dealt with, between Syndergaard being out, Stroman opting out, I kind of like their roster, but I didn't think they were going to have enough. And we spoke both. I don't know if we both did. I know I did. I spoke pretty highly of that division before the season started. Like I was like, listen, I think Atlanta has a shot. I think Philadelphia has a shot. I think Washington has a shot. So the Mets kind of just being in that mix and missing out on two of their best pitchers, I didn't expect much from them. But the NL is kind of interesting, and what I've noticed as a whole throughout the entire season this year and what the playoff picture looks like right now, there's just some surprising teams in there. And I guess that's just what happens in this shortened season, right? If you get off to a good start or you get rolling, you might slide into the playoffs. Obviously, there's an expanded playoffs. But as for the Mets, I know Mets fans are disappointed, but it's nothing new, right? Like, that's just kind of how it is when you're a Mets fan. But they did have some good news. They have a new owner now who has a ton of money. So who knows? Maybe the future is bright over there.
Listen, I was just going to bring that up. Steve Cohen's a great addition to the Mets. He's got a lot of money. Seems to want to really invest in the organization. My thing to Mets fans is this: as Yankees fans, we could attest to it. It's not always the right thing to overspend on players. I could probably name you 20 to 25 players in our lifetime that have gotten overpaid, and it didn't work out for the Bronx Bombers. So, as much as it's nice to spend money, you got to spend the money correctly, and that's where it falls on Brody Van Wagenen and the organization. Now, like you said about the National League, there's a lot of surprising teams, and we both spoke highly, and you mentioned it about the NL East. And I said, like you, I thought Washington, I thought the Braves, I thought the Mets, and I thought the Phillies all had a chance to make the playoffs. Now, mind you, the Marlins, who were the team that had the whole COVID issue to start the year, they're currently the 5 seed in the National League. So here's how it would break down. If the season ended today, the number 1 seeded Dodgers would play the number 8 seeded Giants. That's a shock considering the Giants are pretty much tanking. They don't have Buster Posey either. The Cubs are in the 2 seed. They would take on the 7 seeded Phillies, followed by the 3 seeded Braves, taking on the 6 seeded Cincinnati Reds, who have been a little bit of a disappointment, and then the number 4 seed Padres up against the number 5 seed Miami Marlins. Now, mind you, you may be looking at this trying to figure out why the seedings are the way they are. First and foremost, your top 3 seeds are your division winners. The following 3 seeds are the teams that are in second place in that division. So even if you have a better record and you're the wild card, you are the 7 and 8 seed regardless. And that's where the Phillies and the Giants currently stand. Looking at the NL, what teams intrigue you here?
Well, we know the Dodgers locked up a playoff spot, right? Like they clinched. I believe it was
I
yesterday.
think they clinched on
And to
opening
me,
day.
oh yeah, I was gonna get into that. They're the clear-cut favorites in the NL. I mean, I feel like they've been that for the past few years, but they just have trouble in the playoffs. I don't know what it is. They seem to always have trouble. I'm not trying to jinx anything here, but it's just the truth. Um, I don't know so much about the teams. Like I think Padres are intriguing to me because I do like their roster. I really do. I think they're an exciting team to watch, and they're a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in over a decade. So that's exciting. I think the Marlins being there, another shocker. No one really expected that, but you know what? Listen, that's what it's all about. I mentioned it with the NBA. I want to see teams like that in there because it's unpredictable. I don't know what to expect of them. But I can tell you one thing. The matchups that I'm most intrigued by are the Cubs and the Phillies. I really like that because I like the Cubs. I like a lot of players on that team. I think the Phillies have a nice roster. I feel like that could be a competitive series. And then I just mentioned, too, the Padres and the Marlins just because that series is just so unpredictable. What do you think?
Mind you, the way that it's set up in the postseason, too, and this is important to know, there's no off day. So you're playing at the top seeded home field for 3 games in a row. So if the series started on Monday, you go Monday, Tuesday, the if game on Wednesday. Now, in a shortened series, you look for teams that have pitching. And the Marlins have a kid named Sixto Sanchez who, if you've watched him, he kind of reminds you of Pedro Martinez. That's a scary draw. They have a couple of quality young arms that might be able to get them into the next round. Maybe not in a 7-game series, but a 3-game series is a lot different. If you look at these teams, other than the Dodgers, the Reds have the best pitching of all of them. If Sonny Gray comes back healthy, you're going with Bauer, Castillo, and Gray in a 3-game set. They might, if this stays the same, they might upset the Braves in a series like that. And the same goes for the Phillies. I love the Cubs offensively, but the Phillies pitching is definitely better. And that might be the tale here, in a shortened series where you're not going to be using your bullpen guys every day, or you might have to at this rate if you're playing 3 games. Pitching might win this, and you might see some upsets that you're not accustomed to seeing or think about because of how this format is.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Cincinnati pulls off an upset there either. If healthy, I felt the same way about Atlanta last year. I don't think they have the rotation. I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of their rotation. And that's what the playoffs are all about. You need the pitching. And as Yankees fans, we know that because that's been one of our biggest issues these past few years. But I think we could all agree that I don't know, actually. I was going to say LA might be the best rotation here, but it's kind of a toss-up sometimes. I really like Philadelphia's rotation too. But overall, the best team is LA. There's no doubt in my mind about that. They're the favorites. It might be just like the past few years. Like, if you're going to lose, you're beating yourself.
That could be. And I like LA's rotation. I like Cincy's rotation even more. Not that they have the firepower, but the rotation in itself, if you're going deeper into a series, because let's remember, when you get into a 7-game series, you're playing back-to-back-to-back days. So there might not be any wiggle room to throw Walker Buehler on 3 days rest or Clayton Kershaw on 3 days rest. You might have to rely on that depth. And the Dodgers obviously have it. If you're looking at depth, you're picking them.
Yeah.
The team you mentioned that I want to just talk about a little bit, the San Diego Padres. Fantastic year they're having. If they were in any other division, they'd be the 2 seed. That's how good they've been. Fernando Tatis, you can make the case he's the MVP. Probably the best player in the league throughout the whole Major League Baseball. But you got to give them credit for what they've done. They were really active at the deadline like we talked about on a couple of shows ago. But the way they've been playing, they're young. They have a lot of fire. And let's face it, they have nothing to lose.
Oh, yeah. We did talk about them at the deadline. They made quite a few moves by bringing in Clevenger to try to get, a bigger arm in their rotation. But, they have a young team. And the moves that they're making, I think they notice they have this window and they need to jump on it. And they've had a few big contracts over the years, like Hosmer and Machado. That matchup. I know we're talking about the Padres, but just that matchup in general, 2 of those teams that really haven't been in the postseason in a long time. I think as a baseball fan, you're kind of excited to see how that plays out. And you think about those fan bases. We're Jets fans, different sport, but we struggle. We don't know what it feels like to get to the playoffs. And these teams, like if you're a Padres fan or you're a Marlins fan, you don't know what it feels like to get to the postseason. It's been how long? So I think as just a baseball fan, I'm happy for those fan bases. But listen, with this type of season, and considering they're going to be playing, back to back to back, and it's a shortened season, I don't know what to expect. Like, we could talk, Dodgers look good, or, Philly and Cincinnati have good rotations, or Padres are hot right now. They might have the MVP. It's the playoffs. It's a different type of monster. And this is different. This is a different playoff format than we've seen in the past. So it's like the NBA. We just don't know what to expect. I mean, no one expected Miami to get this far. There might be a team in MLB who slides in there that you're not expecting.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And the no home field after the first round, it does play a factor. But let's jump into the American League, shall we? Let's look at the seedings as of today. You would have the White Sox as the number 1 seed. Who would have expected that? Against the Indians, same division rivalry matchup there. Another one from the AL East, you have the 2-seeded Tampa Bay Rays and the wild card Toronto Blue Jays, who have been struggling as of late. The number 3 seed Oakland Athletics against the number 6 seed Houston Astros. See the trend here, common divisions, but of course the last matchup is not. You have the Minnesota Twins, who would host right now the New York Yankees. Now let's get into the Yankees a little bit. They were struggling Injuries really downplayed what they were trying to do. They couldn't figure it out. They hit rock bottom. But now they are surging. Last 2 nights, 33 runs, 13 home runs, 2 consecutive games of 6 or more home runs as a team. They've been mightily impressive, and it all starts with the pitching staff. Getting quality outings from Cole, quality outings from Tanaka, and even better performances from the young gun in Davy Garcia.
Yeah, I think if you're a Yankees fan, it's kind of put a smile on your face, right? We started off the season hot. We hit a wall, a pretty big wall. I mean, a wall that none of us really expected they'd run into, and now they're hot. I believe it's seven wins in a row, right? 7-game
Yep.
winning streak, right? They're only a few games out from first place. I'm not sure if they catch the Rays, but the focus right now is try to get home field advantage in the playoffs over Minnesota, right? And I don't know what it is, but we just attract Minnesota in the playoffs. It's like deja vu every single year. Hopefully the result is deja vu, if we have to take them on. But yeah, listen, Cole's starting to turn it up again. The pitching staff is pitching well, but I mean, we're lighting up the scoreboard. I mean, the offense is on fire right now. Luke Voigt's leading the league in home runs. Higgy at catcher last night hit 3 home runs. You mentioned it, 6 home runs in back-to-back games. They're on fire. They just got to keep this going. The playoffs are right around the corner. They have 11 games left in the season. They need to carry this into the playoffs, and it's just what they need to do. We can't run into the situation we ran into the past few years where, the bats disappear in the playoffs and we didn't have an ace. Look, we have our ace now. Everything seems like it's working in the right direction. The machine is functioning correctly. So I'm excited as a Yankees fan, but they got to carry this momentum into the playoffs. They only have another week or so.
Now, a couple of things on the Yankees front that I want to get to. I want your opinion on. Number one, if I told you 4 months ago when we were doing our first couple of shows that on September 16th and 15th, the Yankees would score 33 runs, hit 13 total home runs, and that Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, and Gleyber Torres accounted for no hits and no production in that span, what would you have told me?
I wouldn't have believed it. I would have told you you're crazy. You're not thinking Voigt's going to be the guy. You're not thinking Higgy's going to be the guy, right? Or even Frazier. You want to throw him into the situation. I'm a big fan of Frazier, but still. It wouldn't shock me if you told me DJ did, because that guy is literally a machine. I mean, in my opinion, since being on the Yankees, I know he had a nice career in Colorado, but he's the most underrated player in the league, in my opinion. He just does not get the credit. This guy consistently plays well day in and day out. But look, overall, I wouldn't have expected it. But listen, I'm glad those guys are getting going because we need someone to. If Stanton and Judge aren't going to do what they're supposed to, or even Torres, you need someone to step up. If those guys weren't stepping up, we wouldn't be winning ball games.
Now, let me ask you a follow-up question, okay? There's been a lot of speculation because the last 3 starts for Garrett Cole, Kyle Higashioka's been behind the plate. And Cole's been pitching well. Higashioka's been swinging a good bat. Now, as a former pitcher, somebody who's thrown to catchers, does the personal connection matter? And if you're the Yankees, do you consider starting Higashioka in that first game of the first round of the playoffs? Because let's face it, Cole's going to be on the mound.
Listen, Cole's our ace. So I think what they need to do is talk to Cole and see who he prefers. And I think he made a comment last night about I don't want to say exactly what he said because I don't remember exactly, but I believe it was along the lines of he would pitch for him any night, or he'd love to have him behind the plate any night. Now Sanchez to me has not played well, right? And if Higgy's going to hit the way that he is, if he carries that into the playoffs, you got to go with him. And I think what most importantly is listen, forget the bat that he's bringing onto the field. If Cole feels comfortable, look, he's our game 1, he's our game 7, he's your game 1 of the World Series. You got to make him comfortable, and that's what it's all about. So I would leave it up to Cole. What does Cole want? No hard feelings. It's not like Sanchez. It's not like it's a real debate. Sanchez is not really making a case for himself. It's just you hear the name and you think, wow, Gary Sanchez.
If Sanchez was hitting, it'd be an easier discussion. It'd be easy to just say Sanchez is the guy, you got to go with him. But he's not hitting. And you know what? Even if Higashioka doesn't hit, say he goes back to his normal offensive production, you sacrifice the offense there knowing that the other 8 guys in the lineup are going to hit. And that's what you go into. You got to give him a chance, and you got to get Cole as confident and as comfortable as possible. He had a personal catcher in Houston, had a personal catcher in Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, the guy who's shaping up to be his personal catcher isn't Gary Sanchez. And you know what? It's no discredit to Sanchez. He's been making a lot of strides defensively, but he hasn't been the guy offensively. So, you know, you got to look at it in that retrospect, and you just got to roll with it. Now, looking at the American League, is there a team here that stands out to you?
Um, well, first of all, I'm surprised the White Sox um, are sitting there at number one. That I mentioned the other teams like the Padres, the Marlins. It's just a team you don't expect to be there. I know they have a lot of young talent. Um, I think the American League is a little different than the National League, right? I think there's more competitive matchups in the National League, whereas in the American League, I'm not sold on the Indians. I'm not sold on the Blue Jays. Um, the Rays are playing. I'm not really sold on the Twins either, right? The A's are playing well. The Rays are playing well. The White Sox are playing well. I look at the Astros, and, like, I know they're not playing well, but, like, we know what they're capable of. I mean, aside from the cheating, I'm not really sure if they're that good. We don't really know. But if you're looking back at the past at what they actually accomplished, we know they're talented. So I'm not going to completely count them out. I'm not saying this to be biased, but I do think the Yankees are the favorites coming out of the AL. Like, it's theirs to lose. We mentioned the Lakers, how it's theirs to lose. I think in the NL, it's the Dodgers. It's theirs to lose. I think the Yankees are the best team here. So I'm not really – I don't look at these matchups as that great, but there are certain teams the Yankees need to get around. They have not played well against Tampa this year, right? So if we run into Tampa at some point in the playoffs, you got to be able to get past that. And, you know, I think the Yankees are the better team, but listen, the way they've actually played out, they have not been better than Tampa this year.
I want to just echo that. I totally get what you're saying about Tampa, but let's remember, Tampa didn't see this full Yankees team. They saw parts of it all throughout the year. So, yeah, they beat up on them. Yeah, they got their number. But I think healthy, this Yankees team is better, like you said, and it'll be a different outcome. The team I'm watching is Oakland. I love what Oakland brings to the table. I think they're that team that nobody really expects much of, but that's a team that I'm saying if the Yankees aren't representing the American League in a World Series, it's either going to be Tampa or Oakland. I think that's how good Oakland is this year. Before we go to football, I do have to make some shout-outs. I was talking to former St. Joe's coach Frank Salvano, who's tuning into our show. He's been an active listener. And he asked me, why haven't we talked about the St. Joe's guys? There's a bunch of them. So let's get into it. Rob Kaminsky pitching for the Cardinals. I don't know if he was there when you were there, but he was there for my senior year. He was a freshman. Rob's pitching for the Cardinals in relief. I actually struck out Joey Votto the other day. It was pretty cool to watch. Votto had a hissy fit, but it was a strike. Regardless, he's doing really well. Then you look at Tommy LaStella with the A's. He's hitting the cover off the ball. He's actually leading Oakland in batting average. They traded for him at the trade deadline to add some reinforcements. So and Artie Lewicki's pitching for the Diamondbacks. Artie was a guy who was there during my term at St. Joe's. Really good arm. Electric. He had Tommy John surgery, if I'm not mistaken, but he's back and he looked really good in a couple of his outings. So it's nice to see some guys that you watch in high school pitching at the biggest stage in the game.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's kind of weird, right? And I think going to St. Joe's, you take it for granted because you have the McCourties, right? And a kid that I was in classes with, Joe Giles Harris, he's on the Jaguars. Like, there's a ton of guys that you hear about and that you possibly went to school with. Kaminsky, I actually was there when he was there. He was a junior when I was a freshman, so he was a senior when I was a sophomore, and I used to do workouts with him. He was a great guy. He was so helpful to the younger guys, wanted to see us improve. Artie Lewicki, same thing, winter workouts. He was in college. He wasn't in school with me, but same thing, very, very helpful. I mean, these guys were trying to just see us improve because they had those type of mentors above them when they were going through school. So always really helpful. And you know what? Good for LaStella going to the A's, right? Because we talked about that in a previous episode. He was in L.A. on the Angels, the bottom of the barrel. He gets traded not very far from where he was. He goes to Oakland, and he's on a team that's in the playoffs and is competing this year. And we know he won a World Series with Chicago. So, listen, he might be thinking to himself, he might be getting a second ring on his finger. I mean, I'm sure he won back at Joe's, and now he has opportunity to win a second championship in the MLB. That's congratulations to them, and yeah, it's just nice when you have professional athletes coming out of your school.
Yeah, and it's a testament to what Salvano built at St. Joe's, and you can name the amount of athletes that have gone and played professionally. You have Patrick Hiblahan currently with the Blue Jays. He's at their alternate site, but he's another guy that you can mention. Can you imagine that Salvano had a middle infield of Kiblahan and Listella, both guys who are in the pros now. Like, that's insane. That's just a testament to what they've grown and continue to grow at the school. So it's always cool to see guys like, and watching Kwan Williams on Sundays. We'll be able to watch him against the Jets. I sat in class with Kwan, so it's like, you're like, man, I was just sitting next to this guy not even 10 years ago. So credit to them. But I had to give that shout out for Coach. He's been an active listener to our show, so we wish him well and hope that he continues to listen in. Now, let's jump into the NFL. And before I go off on kind of our week one rant, do you want the floor to address your topic of rant? Because I know that you've been holding it in and it's been dying inside of you. Do you want the floor?
You know what? I'm going to hold off on it. I'm going to save it for the end. So if you want to hear what I got to say, you're going to have to finish out the episode here. I don't want to jump into it right now because I feel like it might be a little off topic for what I'm going to say. It's got to be like following Jets talk. So we're going to save it for a little bit.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do in that circumstance, okay? I just put the record for us from the week on the screen so everybody can see how well we did. If you see it's in green, we got it right. If it's in white, not so much. Kyle, you had a good week. You were 11-5. I was just behind you at 10-6. A couple of notables. We both got Philly wrong. Who would have thought that Washington was going to win that one? I picked Carolina to beat Vegas. You took Vegas. You got the win there. Both picked Indy to beat Jacksonville. Who would have thought the Jaguars would actually win a game this year? They did in week one. And then we both picked San Francisco to beat Arizona. Kyler Murray and crew pulled up a little upset. We both took Dallas. I don't know if I'll ever take Dallas again after this. And then I took the New York Giants over the Steelers. You took the Steelers. And then you took Detroit. I took Chicago. The Carolina guy, Mitch Trubisky, had a monster fourth quarter. They say you look like him. Or he looks like you.
I mean, that's what I've heard. I don't know if I'm in agreement with it, but these are things I've heard. So
when he plays well, he looks like you. When he doesn't play well, not a chance.
Yeah.
Now,
don't associate me. I don't want to be associated with him if you lose.
Absolutely. Now, out of the week one games, what stood out to you the most?
Okay, so I'm going to try to make this short and sweet. There's a few different things. Jacksonville, you mentioned them. Listen, shout out to Minshew Mania. You know, it's tank for Trevor. That's all you hear about, and I'm sure that is true, right? But Minshew played great. 19 for 20, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. There's talks of them winning 1, 2, maybe 3 games this year. They already have a win. So shout out to Jacksonville, or Minshew, I should say. Kansas City and Baltimore. Doesn't look like they missed a step, skipped a beat, however you want to put it. They both impressed. I mean, Jackson and Mahomes and their squads on the offensive side of the ball played great. Edwards-Helaire looks like a great addition to Kansas City, which is scary. I don't know how that offense could get better. Baltimore looked good offensively and defensively. You got to talk about New England, right? I think if Cam Newton could stay healthy, if he could focus, Belichick could revamp his career. You might see New England in the playoffs. I don't care who's on the roster right now, who opted out. Another team I wanted to mention was Tampa. Listen, we both had New Orleans winning, and we got that correct. I feel like people are jumping too quickly on the side that, oh, Tampa is going to be bad, Brady's going to be bad. Listen, give them some time. I think they're gonna figure it out. There are 7 playoff spots this year, so they have an extra opportunity to get in. The last team I wanted to mention was Green Bay. We both mentioned, and you actually had Aaron Rodgers, I believe, as your MVP pick. We said he's going to come out on fire because he feels disrespected that they took a quarterback in the first round, and we were perfectly right on that one. I expect him to carry that fire throughout the season. What was your take on it?
So let's look at some of these matchups. I'm looking at the screen to see what stood out to me. Like you mentioned, the rookie running back in Casey's impressive enough. That's insane that they added another weapon that could help them. Atlanta having 3 100-yard receivers and losing, that's pretty embarrassing. But I picked Seattle. I thought that was a one there. Chicago was surprising. They looked bad through 3 quarters. They figured it out in the fourth quarter. That was a game that I thought could have went either way. When you said you picked Detroit, when we did the predictions, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, you know what? That's a good pick. Either way, it could flip. It was like a coin flip. Rodgers, that MVP caliber level, I love it. Keep that up. New England, like you said, Cam, man, like you got to look at what he can do and what McDaniels and Belichick could get out of him. The main thing, like you said, focused. If he stays focused, it's a lot different ball game. Washington winning was a surprise to me. Jacksonville winning was a surprise to me. Cleveland looking as bad as they did was surprising to me.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to lose. I didn't think they were going to lose that ugly. I know their secondary's banged up, but it is what it is. And Joe Burrow didn't look terrible. They lost, but he didn't look terrible. And like you said, I'll echo the Tom Brady. You know, he went for 20 years playing in the AFC East. You're playing arguably your toughest opponent in their home stadium in your debut. It's not a walk in the park.
Yeah.
He'll get better. They'll get better. They have too much talent not to. Don't hit the panic button just yet on them. Other than that, nothing was really surprising.
I'll mention the team real quick. Arizona. Arizona beat San Fran, and we both spoke highly of them last episode. Like, they're doing the right things over there. Like, Kingsbury and company, they're doing the right things. Murray looked good throwing to DeAndre Hopkins. They beat a San Fran team. Like, I know people are kind of torn on them. Oh, Garoppolo's not the real deal. They're overrated, this and that. I think highly of San Fran. I think they have a great defense. I think they have a lot of pieces. So for Murray to come in his second year, play the way that he did, I had to mention them.
Oh yeah, and I'm glad you did. That's a big win. That might be the biggest upset of the week in terms of what we thought San Fran was going to be. Let's remember they're coming off their Super Bowl appearance. That's a big win for Arizona to start the year, especially against the division rival. And the other thing is, Tennessee's still winning with Gostowski forgetting how to kick field goals.
Yeah, you know, I mean, good for him to figure it out, right? You miss 3 field goals, and then you get the game winner. But that says a lot about Denver. Like, how do you not execute on those mistakes? You know, like, you had plenty of opportunities there, and your way of winning was them missing field goals, but you still lost on a field goal. It's just like, you know, their offense had to get going. But listen, I think Denver has a nice roster. I think they have an opportunity to go maybe 500 this year, which in my eyes is an improvement because right now you're trying to build around Locke. You're trying to develop him, and 8-8's not bad for a second-year quarterback who didn't play the full year last year.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that. But now let's jump into the local teams. Let's start with the Giants. They played on Monday Night Football. They lose to the Steelers. Couple of miscues, inexcusable line play. Saquon Barkley cannot have 6 yards of total rushing yards. That's just pathetic in itself. What was your take on the Giants? What did you think specifically of Daniel Jones?
You know, I actually like Daniel Jones. There's something about him. I like how he makes some costly mistakes, but he's not afraid to throw. And, you know, you kind of want that. Obviously, listen, he needs to limit the mistakes. He needs to stop turning the ball over because he's a turnover machine. But those things over time with the right coaching can be fixed, right? And aside from that, I like him. I think he would get a lot more help if they had a better offensive line and maybe Barkley did something. But listen, that's something with the offensive line. I'm not putting the blame on Barkley. It's not Barkley. It's not like he's not focused. It's not like he's hurt anymore. They just don't have a line, and that's going to affect your young quarterback and your young running back who you're trying to build around. The guy I am impressed with, and I have him on a fantasy team, is Darius Slayton. That guy's been playing like great these past 2 years, and he carried that momentum into this year. But overall, their defense is a mess. They're going to have a rough year. Pittsburgh outplayed them. They had opportunities in that game, but for the most part, that the one thing that stood out to me throughout the entire game was they had a really nice drive. I think it was like, I don't even know how long it was, but they went all the way down the field, and Jones made a bad throw when he was getting hit, and they picked the ball off right near the end zone. I was actually out with my friends who were Giants fans, and like you could just see like their faces. Everything was drained out of them because they were like, "Oh, he's making improvements. This is what we needed." The offense is moving the ball, but they're running the clock out. Like they're having a nice drive, and then boom, back to last year with the interception. So, listen, I'm a Jets fan, diehard Jets fan. I honestly hate to say it, but I like Daniel Jones. I have no problem with him. I didn't like Eli, but I like Daniel Jones.
I agree with you. Watching Jones, there's just a confidence about him that you have to like. He's not afraid to throw the ball. When he makes a mistake, you kind of see he kind of owns up to it. But that drive was like a 20-play drive, and that could have kept the game closer. Like if they score there, they capitalize. That's a whole different ballgame. So the score really didn't tell the tale of it. It looked like Pittsburgh took care of them, but in reality, the Giants hung around. Even like you said, a bad offensive line, a bad defense, and they still hung around. I like to echo what you said about Slayton. I love that kid. I liked watching him last year. I think that if you could develop a number one type of receiver for a guy like Jones, it's going to help tremendously. And they have a great set of weapons to surround their young quarterback. And that will transition us into another team in the New York, New Jersey area who seems to have no offensive weapons or talent on the offensive side of the ball, and that's the New York Jets. Now, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, and I'm gonna comment on what you say, but I want this to be Kyle Delahanty's soapbox, spiel, whatever you want to call it.
All right. So first, I'll talk about what I saw on Sunday, which will lead me into my rant. The Jets were a mess, right? You know how you just mentioned how when you see the score, right? Pittsburgh beat the Giants, but when you're watching the game, it was a lot closer than it looked. It was the opposite for the Jets. When you look at the score, it looked close, but they were completely outplayed. Like in my eyes, it wasn't 27-17. It was like 30-10, or you could even make it bigger than that. It wasn't close at all. The game was just boring to watch. They went 3 and out the first 3 drives. At one point, Darnold was like 1 for 3 with 0 yards, and I think it was at the end of the first quarter. And remember, he's being led by a quarterback guru, so I just don't understand how that doesn't really correlate. But it was a joke. So before I jump into that, I want to get your take on that game. What'd you think?
I'll give you a couple of words. It was atrocious. I laughed the entire game because it was pathetic to watch. The same 3 plays called. The offensive guru couldn't even move the ball. They didn't give Le'Veon Bell the ball until the 8th play on offense. Like, you punted twice before Le'Veon Bell touched the ball. Like, what is wrong with you? I get he's hurt now, but it doesn't really matter. But what is wrong with them? How don't you give him the ball? You're paying him $11 million to do nothing because our incompetent head coach wants Frank Gore to get the majority of the carries. It's sickening.
I don't understand it. I really don't. But I'm gonna jump into my rant.
Go ahead. I can't wait for this.
Now I want to say this before I jump into it so people understand. I know it was only week 1. Okay, so it's not like my mind changed since Sunday to now. I felt this way going into this season. That's the number one thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say was I am not putting the blame on Darnold. I'm not saying Darnold is a bust by any means. I think he has a lot of potential. But unfortunately for the Jets, they cannot develop quarterbacks. And what I'm about to say could kind of contradict that, but hear me out. Okay, so I came across a mock draft, all right? And Nick knows where I'm going with this. I know you do. I can see a smile on your face. I came across a mock draft, and in that mock draft, it had the New York Jets taking quarterback Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson, national champion on the Clemson Tigers 2 years ago. And I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'd be completely okay with that happening, right? And now, I wanted to mention the 2 points that I made because it may sound crazy, like, Kyle, what are you talking about? It's week 1, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, of course, the mock drafts are going to say whatever right now. It's going to completely change by the time January rolls around and the regular season's over. I understand that. Also, I'm not putting the blame on Darnold, right? I just think in the situation I'm about to mention, you have to think, like, you have to strongly consider another quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. So I wanted to make a few points. Number 1, I had very low expectations for the Jets going into this year. Very, very low, like usual. Number 2, they don't have talent on this roster. The roster is just bad. Like, you can't even make excuses around it. I don't care who's hurt, who's healthy. The roster is bad. They have a terrible, terrible coach. Horrible. Like, you're not going to win games. I don't care who's on the roster. 4, they looked atrocious on Sunday. Bad. And it's not a fluke. Like, that's the team. And lastly, it's not going to get any better. This schedule is not easy. They're going to get smoked this week by San Francisco. Smoked. It's going to be bad. So if you're looking for a win as a Jets fan, just be prepared. You're not going to get that. Just watch the game to watch the game. But with that being said, I looked at the Jets and what they did this past offseason. At the end of last year, the Jets were 6-2 finishing off the season, right? It was the end of Douglas's first season. Not a full season, but the first out of the games was a completion of his first season. Gase finished off the year strong, gave him somewhat of a reason to come back. Also, by firing Gase, it would have had the Jets in a situation where Darnold would have had 3 coaches in the first 3 years. That's not how you're going to develop a quarterback, right? So I kind of understand why they brought him back, even though I didn't like it. But looking at it this year with the bad roster, with a tough schedule, they are going to be at the bottom of the barrel. So looking at mock drafts right now as a Jets fan, it's not an overreaction. Like you're gonna be in that picture. You're gonna be in the bottom five. And when you look at some of the teams who are supposed to have a bad season this year, a lot of them just drafted quarterbacks. So they're not going to be looking for a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Now, my take on Trevor Lawrence. Listen, I know Nick doesn't like Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't want Trevor Lawrence. At least that's what you've told me. You think he's overrated. I, on the other hand, feel differently. I think he's the real deal. I think he's a can't-miss prospect. He's 6'6", 220 pounds, laser arm. He could run. People can say what they want, like Clemson's loaded, powerhouses. Listen, as a true freshman, to be flawless in your freshman year, going to the national championship, beat Bama the way you did, he could handle the spotlight. That's what New York is. You're under a microscope, right? So my point is, listen, I'm not putting the blame on Darnold. I'm not putting him in the same category as Mark Sanchez as a bust. I'm not. I think he has potential. But I think if you're the New York Jets and you find yourself at the bottom of the barrel, that means Gase is gone, hopefully, and Darnold did not play well. That would be 3 years of Darnold playing 50-50. He's not giving you a real reason to extend him after next year, right? And that's big. If you want to build your team, you got to invest your money into the right quarterback. And I'm sorry, Darnold just hasn't proven to me that he's worth that money. So I think if you're the New York Jets and you're on the clock, or you're two spots away from, let's say, the first pick, and you have 2 first-round picks this year and next year, and a load of picks in general, you got to go get Trevor Lawrence. Like, yeah, you have to. And I know, and this is the last thing I'll say, it may contradict myself because I say the Jets don't know how to develop quarterbacks. But if the Jets are even in that situation, that means Gase is gone. So let's say you hire a guy like Eric Bieniemy, the Chiefs' offensive coordinator. He's helped develop Patrick Mahomes. He's learned under Andy Reid. You bring in a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who these draft evaluators and scouts are saying is the best prospect since Andrew Luck, and they're even making the argument he might be the best since Peyton Manning back in '98. How do you pass on him? Darnold has not given me a reason to cold hard pass on Trevor Lawrence. So that's all I'll say. I want Trevor Lawrence, and I'm going to stick with that. Tank for Trevor.
See, I'm going to go completely against you here. I don't want anything to do with Trevor Lawrence, and there's multiple reasons why, but I'll kind of keep it short because we are over now. We still got to get to our picks. Number one, he's not even the best quarterback in the ACC. If you look talent-wise, if you look development-wise, if you look at what they're doing, Sam Howell is going to be a better quarterback within the next 2 years, and that remains to be seen. People don't know who Sam Howell is, but the kid's good, and he's going to be up there with Trevor Lawrence. Number two, the Jets have not given us any indication, and now I'm 27 years old. They haven't given me any indication over 27 years that they could develop any kind of prospect they draft. So why would they tank to draft another quarterback that they can't develop? They told me the same thing about Sam Darnold. I wanted Baker Mayfield. Was I wrong? Yeah, Baker hasn't been that good. But Sam hasn't been good either. You mean to tell me now the next best prospect of quarterbacks is going to come along and the Jets are going to jump all over him just because he's a name? I don't think it's true. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good management, and especially given if Joe Douglas is sitting at 3 and he has to give up those 2 picks to move up, I think he's even dumber than I already thought. Because if you're rebuilding, why would you trade the picks that you gave up a superstar safety for to get a quarterback that you don't know how he's going to pan out? And also, they haven't developed around the quarterback. Sam Darnold's throwing to JV receivers that they picked up off the street last week. Other than Crowder who had 4 drops that they only credited 2, which I don't understand how. I could count 4 right off the top of my head. He's throwing to nobody. In a draft where they could have loaded up on receiver, especially with the number 11 overall pick, now Mekhi Becton's hurt, another individual that I didn't like the pick. But they could have loaded up on what they needed, and that was to surround Sam in the most vital part of his career as a Jet. They failed him. And in turn, it's going to look like he's a disappointment. Now, mind you, he's making mistakes a rookie makes, and I get that. But overall, I think that I discredit what Joe Douglas has done because he's been terrible. He made the worst ranked offense in football even worse. I don't know how you do that. And Adam Gase should have been fired, should have never even been hired. So, you know what, there's a lot of frustration. I don't think tanking for Trevor's the right answer. He's another quarterback that the New York Jets will just find a way to simply ruin.
So the one thing I say is I think we were both wrong in saying one thing. We were saying tank for Trevor. There's no tanking involved. They're going to go out there and lay their heart out on the line. They're just going to lose. Like, there's no tanking. They're not deliberately trying to lose here. They just lose. So we shouldn't say tank for Trevor. We should just say go out there, do the best you could,
Try your
and
best.
maybe we'll fall to our laps. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? You can definitely make that case. They go out there trying their best, but they just can't figure it out. Now, let's get into our rapid fire weekly picks. We're over our little bit of allotted time here, but anyway, let's get into it. I'll give you the matchup. Give me your pick for the week. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, starting tonight, you're going to watch in a little bit. Cleveland hosting Cincinnati.
Got to go Cleveland.
I'm going to say Cincy gets their first win of the year. I don't know why. I just got a weird feeling about it. I'm not sold on the Browns. The Bears host the Giants.
Got to go Chicago. I think the defense might be a little too much.
I think so too. Daniel Jones fumbles twice. They lose the ball game. Chicago wins. Dallas hosting Atlanta.
This is going to be a good one. I think high scoring. I'm going to go Dallas. I don't know if Dallas starts the season off 0-2.
High scoring goes in Atlanta's favor. I'm going with the Falcons on the road. Green Bay hosting Detroit.
Rodgers carries over from week 1 into week 2. They get the dub.
The MVP that you'll all know soon will take over. Green Bay wins. Tennessee hosting Jacksonville.
I think it's going to be closer than people think. But I got to go Tennessee. I don't know if Jacksonville has that much, but I think they're going to put up points, possibly. I like Tennessee's defense.
I agree with you there. I like the defense. I say low-scoring Tennessee wins. Indianapolis hosting Minnesota.
Another good one. But I'm going to go I almost said Minneapolis. I mixed the two together, and that's an actual city. I'm going to go Minnesota.
I'm going to go Minnesota, too. I think Cousins gets the win for them. Buffalo at Miami.
Got to go Buffalo. I'm not sure if Buffalo played well last week or the Jets just suck. But I'm going to go Buffalo.
Listen, Buffalo don't impress me, but they'll beat Miami. Now, do we even say it, San Fran coming to visit the Jets?
I think I gave my answer earlier.
I think so, too. I don't think I'm picking the Jets at all this year. I'm going San Fran. Rams at Philly.
I think it's going to be a good game, too. The reason I'm going to go L.A. with this one is Washington had 8 sacks on Carson Wentz. That means the offensive line did not play that well, and L.A.'s D-line looked pretty good last week, so I'm going to go L.A.
I agree with you, and especially their secondary's banged up. Miles Sanders a little banged up as well. I'm going with the Rams. Pittsburgh hosting Denver. That should be a good one.
Another close one. I'm going to go Pittsburgh, just because I think they handled a young quarterback in Jones pretty well last week. You're going to versus a young quarterback in Locke this week, so I'm going to go Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh at home against the Denver team that struggled last week. I got to see something out of Denver before I pick them. Tampa Bay hosting Carolina, another division matchup.
I think Brady gets his first win in Tampa this go round. I'm not very high on Carolina at all.
I agree on the Tampa aspect. Arizona hosting Washington, the 1-0 Washington football team.
Yeah. Listen, I don't know what to take of Washington either. I think Rivera is making them believers, and the D-line played really well, getting 8 sacks. But I got to go Arizona. I've been hyping them. I got to stick with them.
I agree. I think Arizona goes to 2-0 in the year. Kansas City visiting the Los Angeles Chargers.
Kansas City.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me too, KC. Baltimore at Houston. That might be the game of the week.
It's a good one. I'm not sure if Houston's going to be as good as they were last year, but Watson, Jackson, we might be seeing that matchup for years, but I got to go Baltimore.
I agree on that one. At Seattle's hosting New England.
It's another good one. But I never go against Russ. I just never do. I think it's going to be close, but I got to go Russell Wilson.
I think so, too. I think Jamal Adams' case for Defensive Player of the Year continues, and it keeps burning the Jets. Seattle wins in this one. I think they win relatively in big fashion. And the final game of the week, New Orleans at Las Vegas. You picked Las Vegas to win last week. Do they pick up another win this week?
The only reason I had to win it last week is they versus Carolina. So I got to go New Orleans here.
I agree with you there. And that's our picks for the week. And to be honest, this was a long show today. We talked about for over an hour, 5 minutes plus, and we had a lot to cover.
There was a lot to talk about. I apologize for my rant. Definitely longer than I thought it was going to be, but I had to get it all out. I've been holding it in all week. There might be more to come next week, so we'll just say that was chapter 1.
Listen, I love the rant. I was encouraging it the whole show. I probably added to it. I probably made you go a little longer. But nonetheless, check us out next week, same time, same place. We'll be back talking about everything and anything regarding the world of sports. Hopefully, we have another Jets rant from Kyle. Hopefully, we have some NBA playoffs and some baseball to talk about as well. But until next time, you know how to find us on social media. Go to our website, delahantymedia.com, for all the latest news and updates from us. But with that being said, we'll catch you next time. And again, stay healthy, stay safe, and continue enjoying the sports. And we'll break it down for you next week.
Enjoy the game tonight, guys. We'll see you next week.